Welcome back. Final America at War content video. Do a final mailbag video. So not technically a final video, but final video of any type of educational purpose, if you can call what I've been doing educational at all. A few things. Nail gun. Sweet. This thing is sweet. Works awesome. Shout out Milwaukee Cutting Tools. Hook me up. Good stuff. I got my drill. A lot of different projects going on. Trying to expand the Church of Iron a little bit. Utilize this time properly. I got my guitar ready to play if need be. All right. Final video. Gotta emotionally come down a little bit for this. Okay. Well, it's more comedy in here. All right, there we go. Okay. Essential question. What's your biggest takeaway from the class? Hopefully you learned a little bit of something. It could be a leadership takeaway. It could be a takeaway about human nature, about human beings. It could be a takeaway about military. It could be a takeaway about war itself. It could be a takeaway about Vietnam. I'm also curious kind of what unit or like what war you guys found most interesting. For me personally, I thought the Vietnam War was the one that we did the best job on. It is very tough not to feel horrible for those American soldiers in the way that they were treated by the press, by politicians, by the American public. But that is the essential question. You don't need to write questions for this video. After this video, some of you will continue on to my current events class, which is not really a current events class. It'll become a Cold War class, because that's a far more interesting topic. So I think we're all sick of talking about the coronavirus anyway. For other of you, and I'll go more in depth in my final mailbag video. Again, this will be our last time you getting to see the insanity that has become my life. All right, get to the end of World War II. Okay, yeah. Whoa. Again, I spent entirely 2 classes on this, during first quarter, so I'm really shortening this up quite a bit. But after the D-Day invasion, certainly the United States and the Allies slowly make their way close to Germany. What Hitler and the Germans and the Nazis end up planning is basically they have one last-ditch attempt through the Ardennes. The idea is that they kind of stop attacking and stop expanding, and they lull the Allies into a false sense of security. Is that just like a spider web that just flew? Oh no. So I'm losing it for sure. Yeah. I've gone 4 weeks without seeing any other human beings, so that's concerning. That on December 16th, that's when the Germans launched their attack. It, again, talked about it earlier this time, the enemy gets a vote. Hey, we can use intelligence, the enemy can use intelligence. We can use great planning and logistics, the enemy can use great planning and logistics. And a lot of that's what the Germans do with the Battle of the Bulge. They send their version of special forces behind American lines. They are wearing American uniforms. They change the names of road signs, so when they do attack, we can't counterattack or can't counterattack effectively. They blow up bridges so we can't reinforce certain areas. They kill important officers, important American soldiers, so there's confusion in the U.S. ranks. It's a very well-planned, coordinated attack. And so on December 16th, when they launch attack, the United States is completely caught off guard. The American commander who's in charge of the First Corps, which is the corps right in the center of this, he's kind of so embarrassed, he's sick and stuff. And it becomes this giant bulge in the American line. There's the camera. There's a giant bulge in the American line, hence why they call it the Battle of the Bulge. There's a bulge in the line. The German goal is to break through the American line and get to the ports, and that way they could cut off the supply line to the Allies, basically forcing the war into a stalemate, which would lead to essentially a surrender by the Allies and a pause to World War II, which would inevitably lead to some type of World War III against the Germans and the Nazis. So that's kind of what the German goal is. And so what happens on December... We're going to go no hat. Hair looks really good. Again, hook me up with the haircut. So after December 16th, and the lines have solidified a little bit, the Allies are freaking out because, holy crap, we just lost the war. And so Eisenhower calls a meeting with all his generals, and I think the other reason why I like the Battle of the Bulge is because this is Patton's finest moment. Patton's a lot of things. I like talking about Patton. Is Patton the greatest general in American history? I don't know, probably not. Is he probably the most interesting? Yeah, he's a very unique person. And so Patton he had a gut feeling that this was going to happen, and so he begins to tell his subordinate officers, begin planning for a possible counterattack against the Germans, because Patton, as crazy as he was a student of von Clausewitz. He was a student of Sun Tzu. He understood the value of intelligence. He understood how to outthink his opponent. And so he kind of knew something was going on, and so he created all these contingency plans just in case. And so they get to this meeting, and the story goes that Eisenhower goes around the room and asks all these different generals, what do we do? What do we do? What do we do? And no one has any ideas. And he finally gets to Patton, and Patton's kind of been unusually quiet. And so Eisenhower even says that, like, George, you've been quiet. Like, what do you have? And Patton, because he's a very brazen individual, he says, I can attack with my entire division in 3 days. And what he's basically proposing is impossible. Like, this has never been done in military history before, where you take an entire division fighting here, stop fighting here, turn 90 degrees, and then continue to fight somewhere else. That's just never happened in that short period of time. And the entire room starts to laugh because they think Patton's just kind of kidding and stuff, and Eisenhower doesn't say a word. And because what Eisenhower realizes is Patton can do this. He's the one person, maybe in American military history, period, other than Stonewall Jackson, who has the tactical ability to actually pull this off. And so Eisenhower goes to Patton, well, George, can you really do this? And Patton responds, I can do it because I'll tell my men to do it. That Patton's men were so well trained, so disciplined because of Patton, they could do the impossible. And so Patton begins his counterattack slowly after Christmas. While all this is going on, the 101st Airborne Division is locked into Bastogne. And Bastogne is this railway hub where all these different railways stuck right in the center of the German lines now. They can't give this up. They're starving. They're almost out of ammunition. They're facing an onslaught of barrage on a daily basis. But they can't give up this position because it allowed the Germans to resupply themselves quicker, almost ensuring the Allies would lose the battle and the war. And so there's this famous moment while Patton is moving his soldiers in this counterattack where the German commander sends a letter to the American commander, a guy named General McAuliffe. And he basically says, like, if you surrender, we'll feed your men, we'll give them life. There's no reason for the bloodshed, etc., etc. And McAuliffe's woken up with this letter in the middle of the night, and his first response is nuts. Like, basically a profanity in his mind. And he pauses and then goes to the chief of staff, well, what should I write? And he goes, well, I think you've already said it perfectly. So the response to the German commander is N-U-T-Z, nuts, which really was just a middle finger to the Germans. And when Patton hears word of this, now he's been more motivated to get into that position. They begin the counterattack after Christmas. The 101 is holding on to this position, even though they would claim they did not need rescuing. But the Third Army begins coming up from the south, but they need air cover to ensure this counterattack is successful. And it's been bad weather. And so what Patton does, in only Patton terms, is he asks the minister to make a prayer for good weather so he can kill his enemy. And so the Reverend writes this prayer and stuff, and Patton, the Reverend overhears this, where Patton, gives this long prayer, and at the end, he says to add his own thing. And Patton has this thing where, his relationship with the Almighty was very much one based upon, I don't know how to describe it, because he would, swear during prayers and cuss at him, and who knows. But he ends it with, and if you don't give me good weather, after I'm done with these blankety blank blanks, I'm coming after you next. And so the story goes, the skies opened up, and the Reverend afterwards said, not even the good Lord himself wanted to mess with George S. Patton when Patton was in a bad mood. And so the counterattack works. By January 25th. We've pushed back the Germans not only to the original line, but now well past that. The war's not officially over, but it's basically over. The German army's been completely defeated. Now it's just kind of picking up the scraps. In a move that Eisenhower would later regret, and a move we'll talk about in Cold War, Eisenhower allows the Soviets to take Berlin. There's going to be big consequences for that later on. Eisenhower does not know it at the time. Patton is pleading with Eisenhower to let him go in first because Patton also has a very strong understanding of how evil the Soviets are and the problem they're going to be in the future. But Battle of Bulge, it's one of the deadliest battles in American history. It's the largest battle in American history in terms of total manpower. 75,000 American casualties during this battle. Again, it's a horrific battle. It's the deadliest battle of World War II for the Americans. 80 to 100,000 Germans are killed, so their military strength is basically destroyed. By May 7th, 1945, Germany has officially surrendered, ending that part of World War II. On the Pacific Theater, during this time, there's stuff going on, and it's island hopping. So the American plan in the Pacific Theater, once they've turned back the tide against the Japanese, and Leyte Gulf is a great battle to research, just one, frankly, just ran out of time. But that's a prelude to this. What the Americans decided is if we're going to invade the Japanese homeland, we need to have island bases leading up to it so we can resupply, so we can bomb them, to make our bombing missions more successful, and we can run more of them. And so it's called island hopping. The first island in this is Iwo Jima. On February 19th, 1945, U.S. Marines stormed the beaches of Iwo Jima. They get sucked into the main part of Iwo Jima, where for the next 36 days, 26,000 Marines are casualties. Iwo Jima is not a big island. These are horrific numbers considering how small the island actually is. What we do get of is the famous flag raising of Iwo Jima, but that combined with Okinawa, which from April 1st to June 22nd, 1945, it took 82 days and 62,000 American Marine casualties to take this very small island. With around 100,000 American casualties to take these two small islands, American decision makers decided invading the homeland of Japan, if like these two small islands took that big of casualties, what's going to happen when we actually invade the mainland of Japan? Estimates run anywhere between 2 and 3 million American casualties. President Truman, who's now president because FDR had passed away during this time and stuff, he's given information that we have this weapon, the atomic bomb. And now the atomic bomb, again, something we're going to talk about way more about in the Cold War class if you're there. And even if you're not in the class, join the classroom. Let me know. Join the classroom. You don't need to do any homework with that. Just join the classroom. Cold War, we're still dealing with Cold War remnants right now. And we will be for a long time. But we have atomic bombs. And so Truman decides we're going to drop one on Hiroshima. Now, he doesn't really know what the strength of this thing is, but it looks like a more viable alternative than the actual land invasion of Japan, where, again, you're talking just American casualties being around 2 million. You add in Japanese casualties, especially civilian casualties, you could be around 4 to 6 million people getting killed. It's weird to say that, but the atomic bombs probably saved lives. On August 6, 1945, the first atomic bomb is dropped at Hiroshima. Hiroshima is not the largest city. That'd be Tokyo. So I do think it's interesting too that the United States did not choose to drop atomic bombs on the largest populated cities. They dropped them on industrial bases. Hiroshima and Nagasaki, both industrial bases. They drop it on August 6th. Japan does not surrender, and so the United States is kind of saying, what do we do? On the 7th, nothing happens. On the 8th, nothing happens. On the 9th, we drop our second atomic bomb on Nagasaki. They still don't surrender right away. There's a little bit of time where Japanese military officials are talking about, you know what, we can still win. Like, we can still force them to invade the homeland where we can get a military draw out of this. And so the Japanese, to say that, like, they were already broken by the time we dropped the atomic bombs, it's just not historically accurate. They were still talking about fighting after the second atomic bomb was dropped. Thankfully, they surrendered because we didn't have any third atomic bomb made yet. Abby, you're probably very interested in this. We're talking about atomic bombs for the first time. And I regret not calling out more students. Let's call some students. Joe? Great job. Okay. Alexis. Great job. Alexis, you're doing a really good job in class. Man, I'm going to miss you guys. Like, this stinks. Like, the entire thing stinks. The Corona stuff stinks. The fact that this all stinks. Callie, there's no way you're actually watching this. Like, there's no way you're actually watching these. But I appreciate the question. I will answer your questions. Very poignant questions. But there's no way you're actually watching this. Skylar, you're definitely not watching this, for sure. Who else is not watching this? I should come up with a list of people who I know are definitely not watching this. Those two in particular. Who is definitely watching this? Addie. She's definitely watching this. Ryan's definitely watching this. Noah's definitely watching this. Lisa's definitely watching this. Kylie's definitely watching this. Hardcore Nick. I haven't talked about Hardcore Nick enough. Hardcore guy. I'm sure Corona's too scared to deal with Hardcore Nick. What are we talking about here? Okay, so on September 2nd, 1945, the Japanese officially surrender, ending the deadliest conflict in human history. Here's some total numbers and stuff. Over 100 million people are killed during World War II. The Soviet Union, 20.6 million deaths. Germany, 6.8 million. Poland, 6.1 million. Of that 6.1 million, 6 million were civilian deaths. They lost 17% of their total population in World War II. Allied civilians, 25.4 million civilians from the Allied side were killed. 5 million Axis civilians were killed. So about 30 million of the deaths were civilian. Completely had nothing to do with the actual battles themselves. The United States lose about 400,000 soldiers, so we kind of went out on that. Is World War II the official end of things? No. Because right after World War II, there's a glimmer of hope that there could be peace in the world, but it just doesn't happen as the Soviet Union tries to take advantage of a broken Europe to exert their power and dominance in the area, and thus leads to the United States having to step up for a third time in 50 years to try to keep the world safe. But that is what the next class is about, so it kind of leads in perfectly. Okay, answer this such a question. What's your biggest takeaway from the class? It's a life thing. Maybe you learn something about life. Maybe something about life. Human nature. Human nature. This class is very much human nature, leadership, military, things like that. Maybe it's a leadership thing, military thing. Book review. Did do a book review last time. Okay, here we go. Sheepdogs. Sheepdogs. Meet Our Nation's Warriors. It's very short. It's like a kid's book. This is written by that former West Point psychology professor, Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman. Actually, I got signed by him, by the way. This is kind of the book that outlines like his theories and all that on the human nature and the necessity for good people to be sheepdog, good people to harness the gift of aggression and protect those who cannot protect themselves. It's a fascinating book. I think our society would be a lot better if we had more people that use their gifts and their talents to protect others and protect those who cannot protect themselves. Certainly I feel, and many of you would probably agree, that we feel like we live in a world where maybe we don't have as many sheepdogs as we need. So be a sheepdog. Be a good person. Okay. Thank you again. I have one more mailing video. Ask me questions. Do what you need to do. I thank you again.